This ain't one of them professional videos. This is not optimal circumstances. This is a real life situation. Go ahead and criticize me in the comments. I don't care. I love it. Seized brake caliper. You got to get it back together today, but of course if you can't press the caliper back, you can't fit the new pads in. These pads are a mile away from grinding. Right there on that edge, you can see they're donezo. It's the weekend after hours. Gotta have it done. Nobody who's still open has it in stock. We know we need a new caliper, but we got to get back on the road today. What do we do? These are turn back style calipers. You got to have like a little kit or a little square tool. Square tool is cheap. Don't get as much force and pressure on it. So to turn these back, you have to have inward pressure and turning force at the same time. So I took the rotor off right there. To take the rotor off, you got to take the caliper and bracket off. Then put the bracket back on. Have our tool inserted into the caliper. Put the caliper back on with the bolts on. Why did I do that? Well, you can't get enough force holding the caliper with one hand and trying to turn it with this. Maybe you got a buddy and maybe it's not that seized and he can hold it while you wrench away on this. It's a series of events that led up to today. Now we can wait till we have a caliper in stock on Monday. We can reassemble this and it's not that horrible. Like, I can still turn it in, but oh god, it takes a lot. It's Saturday, you got somewhere to go tonight and tomorrow. You're not gonna damage much, wear out the pads much from a slightly seized or stiff caliper for driving it for a day or two. Not the optimal situation, but sometimes you gotta make do with what you got, right? Holding the caliper with my left hand and turning this with the right, I could get it to go in. This caliper was hyper extended almost. You could see how worn out the pads and rotors are. So it was way far out. Barely anything left, right? One thing you can do is hit the brake pedal and shoot that piston out. And many times you'll see a rust film on the caliper piston. You can polish that down, put it back in. And if it's sealed, good to go. But it is pretty tricky to get those pistons back in there. You'll see an inner seal and then your outer dust boot. It's tricky to get them in there. It takes a lot of finesse, some experience. Don't really recommend that for the average person. I have rebuilt some calipers that were like expensive imports, where each caliper is $250, $350. This is just a Ford, probably a $75 caliper. Just replace it. But we gotta drive today, right? Now that the rotor's gone, we can fit our tool in there, and you see this as you turn it to the right, it presses in and twists that caliper back in. And we are making a little headway, so it's a sticky caliper, not totally seized. And I opened the bleeder up to make sure it wasn't a restricted hose. A restricted hose can also give you this situation where the caliper won't turn back in. Well, with the bleeder open, it doesn't get any easier. We know it's the caliper that's bad. Double check that your parking brake isn't hanging up and it is in the stop position. So right there's your stop. It hits this pin right here. It's kind of got like a little flat spot that it hits, so our parking brake is not engaged at all. Sometimes you see some sticky parking brakes that'll cause this issue. You can see this is a well-used tool. I like to use this for sticky situations like this. I don't care if I bend or break or anything. I've thought about welding a nut on the end of it, cut that off, weld a nut onto there, and that would work pretty good. All right, so this tool, you get your adapter that fits into your caliper, bam. You turn to the left because this is a right-hand turning tool. You also have left-hand turning tool. Drink Alley Pop, it's delicious. Not sponsored, but they can sponsor me if they want to. So we're gonna turn this to the left, which is gonna tighten up our tool onto the caliper. And then we're gonna turn this to the right, so we got that inward pressure because it's pushing back against here and pushing forward against there. Then this turns it, boom, our caliper will compress. And then Monday or Tuesday, when we can get a new caliper, we slap it on. Everything's torn apart. It's not going back together. This is how we get our new brake pads on today. So this bracket, I just put it back on loosely. Get a few threads on there. It's like somebody is holding it for you, but even better because it's even more steady. put your wrench on here because you're going to need a lot of force to make that caliper go in. Then we turn it. See, it's sticky. I've loosened it up. You can even take a little bit of lubricant to spray inside of that boot in case it is rusty crusties on the surface of the piston that's keeping it from pushing back in. So it got a little loose as we're pushing in, so we'll go ahead and tighten this back up by turning it to the left. It expands it, and we are almost all the way compressed here. And then once we're all the way compressed, we can put our thicker pads back on, slap the rotor on, reassemble everything, get by for 2 days, and then get our new caliper installed, bled, and that'll be the way to go because we have to have this done today. And it's the only situation that gets this car driving today. There we go. I think we're all the way bottomed out now. See, it gets like really stiff. Hard to tell with a sticky caliper if you got all the way there. But I think we're all the way there. Not all calipers compress flush to the caliper. Some of them stick out a little bit like that. You see that? Sticks out a little bit. So, yep, that's all the way compressed. Now I can reassemble. Getting to tear apart the other side, you can see the caliper's been replaced, and we have, 60% life on these pads. Actually, take a look at the thickness of the new pad, and shoot, that's more like 75% life. So sticky caliper really prematurely wears down your brakes, guys. All right, go to this side. Looks like a brand new caliper, and you can see I can easily turn that with my hand, even with the bleeder closed. No issues here. And that's how it should spin. You shouldn't have to put any type of tool on this short bar. That's how it's supposed to go. So let's say these brakes are 6 months old, a year old. I have no idea. First time I've serviced this vehicle. You got a bad caliper on the rear right, and the rear left is still fine, but it's been through just as much abuse as the rear right. Like, why do I need a new caliper? It's just fine. Well, there's a higher chance that rear left is going to go out after the rear right, and then you're just paying more money for another service, wearing down your brand new pads. Like, yeah, it's a gamble. Are you a gambling man or not? Some shops won't even change a caliper unless you change them in pairs, both fronts or both rears, depending on which one has the bad caliper. They don't want comebacks. They want to have a good name. So, yeah, it's up to you. Change them one at a time or change them in pairs. Change them one at a time, you might end up like this vehicle.